it's really changing the paradigm and the realization of true personalized medicine when we start to look at a person's genes, when we start to tailor our recommendations, our screening, our treatments to what is within that person's DNA.
Dr. Egan, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think the other sort of really important thing to think about is that, women in this, midlife, this is sort of, aside from having babies, this is sort of their first introduction to heavy medicine, right? For a lot of the times they've been healthy, or maybe they've even ignored going to the doctor. And some of them can be quite skeptical about the recommendations I have. I'm like, hey, let's, get at this test or start this drug. And, they sometimes side eye me and are like, why would I do that? Because I'm outside of all these other population data. And if I have more information for them, they just sometimes feel much more confident, starting a medication, taking a test, particularly the pharmacogenomics. If they know that they're low risk for having side effects, that really lowers the barrier to starting medications. And, they feel so cared for when we have that information and we're taking that into account when we're making decisions.
This podcast is produced by Concierge Medicine Today, LLC. All rights reserved. Concierge Medicine Today, or CMT, was founded in 2007 and serves as the industry's trade publication and annual medical conference organizer. Please note, the information shared on this podcast and across all CMT platforms is intended for general informational purposes only and may contain errors or omissions. Nothing in this podcast nor across CMT platforms constitutes medical, financial, legal, nor professional advice, and CMT is not liable for any inaccuracies. CMT encourages listeners to conduct their own research and consult trusted advisors before taking any action based on the content presented. No mention, interview, or link should be considered an endorsement. This content is primarily intended for a healthcare audience and may not apply to all listeners. Thanks for tuning in.
Well, good morning or good evening, Docpreneur Nation. You're listening to Concierge Medicine Today's Docpreneur Leadership Podcast. And today we have two very special physician friends and guests. We have Dr. Brandon Colby. He has been a repeat on this podcast over the years. You might remember him from sequencing and whole genome sequencing, explaining that several years ago. And we also have Dr. Celia Egan. And we're going to go ahead and give you guys the platform, the microphone for a moment to explain your titles and what you do and where you are in the space of precision medicine and whole genome sequencing and concierge medicine, and how they all tie together is what we're going to talk about today. So Dr. Colby and Dr. Egan, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So before we begin, I'll start with Dr. Egan, because you're in the concierge medicine field. Tell us about your title and a little bit about what True Women's Health is.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me. I am an internal medicine doctor by training, and I am the director of obesity medicine, and I basically run our primary care division at True Women's Health, which is a concierge medicine practice focusing on women's health. So we see women 18 on up, and we love bringing in new technology and testing that seems to make sense in terms of longevity and precision medicine.
Wonderful. And Dr. Colby, a repeat guest, tell us a bit about what you are doing at sequencing.com.
All right. So it's so nice to be back and see you again, Michael and Celia. Hello as well. So my name is Brandon Colby. I am the founder and CEO of sequencing.com. I'm trained as a medical physician in internal medicine and medical genetics. And I focus on finding ways to empower a person with information about their DNA. And the most important thing is what they can do with that information to live a healthier and longer and happy life.
So briefly, Dr. Colby, tell us, explain how sequencing.com is maybe different from the other, types of organizations, or maybe we have to list your competitors, but tell us about how you operate in the healthcare space with physician practices, and then do you operate direct to consumer, direct to patients?
Our service is very different than the services most people are familiar with, and that's, we could say, 23andMe and the other companies that a lot of people think about when they hear a DNA test. Our service, it utilizes a new technology. It's called whole genome sequencing. That is a much more advanced genetic test It looks at 100% of a person's DNA. So all your genes, all your data, whether we know that it's relevant or not, this single test obtains everything, all of that data. Very different than the testing that's used by other companies that usually just look at about 0.1%, so less than 1% of a person's DNA. And then they try to go and they make some medical inferences based on that, some things related to health and wellness, but it's usually pretty superficial, that information. And for people who have used those services, they know it doesn't really impact their life. It's not something that you learn something that is truly insightful about your health. What we focus on is very comprehensive health analysis for basically everything that is known on a genetic level. Because we're sequencing the entire genome, we can look at everything that is known on a genetic level and then provide that information to people so that instead of knowing what you're looking for before a genetic test and saying, I think maybe I have this condition and therefore I have to look at these genes, which is the traditional way of performing genetic testing. Now, whole genome sequencing is you just look at everything, you analyze everything, and it's like many times pulling a needle out of a haystack because you'll see things that you didn't even know were important, but that your genes are putting you on a path towards. And once you know that information, it's empowering to be able to many times modify that path and say, I don't want to head down that path. I want to do things that would modify that path in terms of changing your environment, eating a specific way, different screening exams by when the doctor is aware of that, different screening at different ages also. So there's a lot that you can do for a lot of conditions once you know on a genetic level that they're putting you on that path, that they're increasing your risk of a condition.
So zooming out for you, Dr. Egan, what kind of caught your attention, caught your interest related to women's health and whole genome sequencing in the space of concierge medicine? As we were discussing off air, there's, physicians are so busy. They're usually a specialist or family or internal medicine, and to bring in or to talk about and discuss, even at medical conferences years ago, it was like, I really like this, but I don't know much about it. So what really drew you into it and kind of said, yeah, this is something we need to lean into in our concierge practice?
So one of the things that makes True Women's Health unique is that we have a wellness plan that we implement for all of our patients that includes 10 areas of wellness, everything from where you're at in terms of your phase of ovarian function to sexual health to cardiovascular health. And one of the areas that we were missing is, we go through sort of these risk calculators for different disease processes, cardiovascular health, for instance. And we found that in order to make a better decision, maybe about a medication or a test, we were missing the full picture. And that's what drove us to seek out a company that would allow us some of that information in terms of genetics. As I was looking to find that company, I think sequencing, particularly the fact that they do 100% of the genome and then are continually evolving their reports and the way that they look at that data. And it was very patient driven in terms of if a patient wanted a different look at that genome, that they could do that. Before working with sequencing, we did work with companies that did cancer genetics, but that was really only answering a very small question. And we had so many other questions in terms of wellness and risk stratification that we really just wanted another choice. And that's how we ended up working with sequencing.
Before we go back to Dr. Colby to ask about walk us through the customer experience for you, Dr. Egan, what advice, kind of onboarding in this process, because you've done the homework, you've done the research, would you give other concierge doctors saying, I've had that. That's my story. I've done the cancer tests and I've done this, these other things. And it's still putting pieces of the puzzle together. And there's no, silver bullet, of course, but what advice would you give them in this kind of exploratory phase of like, I really wish things could get simpler because we're almost there?
Yeah, I think sometimes, particularly with risk stratification, there's so much gray, and the guidelines are just these sweeping buckets of populations, and trying to answer that question for the patient in your room of, is this a good medication for you? Is, doing maybe advanced cardiovascular testing a good choice for you in this moment? We still had some pockets of gray. And I would just tell those physicians, like, lean into that gray and let's work on finding other tests that make sense to sort of clear the way for a better understanding for that patient in that room.
Now, Dr. Colby, you said something years ago, I remember, and it was so helpful because, whole genome sequencing, our DNA, knowing a little bit about our DNA has been so helpful it's been talked about for like 30 years, now 40 years almost. And, but now it's hit its stride, and it's still hitting its stride. And I'm still impressed by the way concierge medicine physicians and practices out there that we talk to are still leaning into this. How do these tests work? And walk us through the customer experience. Is this a physician ordered test, or is this a direct to consumer? How would physicians start to engage with this, Dr. Colby? And then we'll pivot over to you for the same question, Dr. Egan.
Forward testing can be utilized in multiple ways. So for forward looking practices and really those at the forefront, like True Women's Health, that they can offer our whole genome sequencing in terms of having the kits, the DNA collection kits in office. And then when patients come in, they can utilize that kit, which then goes to a CLIA certified CAP accredited laboratory in the United States. Whole genome is sequenced. And we receive the data. The data that you obtain from whole genome sequencing is massive. It's about 60 gigabytes, 60 gigabytes of data. That's more data than most people will ever see about themselves with any other test that exists. So we go and we securely store that data in the patient's account, and then we provide various reports of that information and make those reports available to that patient's doctor at True Women's Health. So there's that continuity of having that test performed or the swab collected in office, all the way through receiving the data and then the reports, which the patient has control over, and then True Women's Health physicians have access to, so that they can work together as a team using that information that's within the person's genes to construct a more well-rounded plan of prevention now that they have that whole genetic component to consider.
Dr. Egan, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the times patients will, obviously get a lot of information. And I think for patients initially, that feels a little overwhelming because they're reading everything from, how they process drugs to their risk of rare diseases. And so, it's our job in the office to take that information and put it in the right place. And so a lot of the times I'll say to my patients, I'm going to use this genetic information to answer a question, right? So should you start a statin? Do we anticipate that you're going to have side effects from a drug such as that? And we're going to use then that genetic information to say, yeah, it looks like maybe you're at a higher genetic risk of having a higher side effects from that medication. Maybe we would hold on that for the time being and try some other lifestyle changes. And so we'll use the mountains of information piece by piece to create a better picture of that patient's health and answer a question that makes sense for them.
Now, I always come at these interviews and really the concept of concierge medicine in practice and in the whole genome sequencing and precision medicine conversations as a patient, because I'm not a physician, but I am a patient. And so the perspective that provides me is that I do know what it's like to sit on the other side of the screen, the paperwork, the office and the exam room from my doctor. And one of the things I've noticed over the years and having done this myself is holding the doctor accountable to the information that's in there and saying, hey, I want to remind you that this is why I'm coming in today. I don't have any issues right now. I just want to make sure that you're still on top of this. I know you're super busy. So, Dr. Egan, what advice do you have for physicians thinking that, well, that's a lot of information and I'll just file it away. And then I kind of forget about it and we just kind of do the scrapes, bumps, and bruises and flus.
Mhm.
And then I'll pivot over to you, Dr. Colby, for your thoughts and perspective as well.
I mean, I think it's always helpful to get a broad view of some of the outliers. So, if a patient clearly has a very high genetic risk of a rare disease or a major anticipated complication, I think that's always a good thing to know upfront and sort of have that discussion before we ever have a question about it. For instance, if they just don't process any antibiotics, right, we need to have that question, have that thought now and that conversation now about what they would do if they needed those antibiotics, and how would we move through that clinical plan with that information before it ever happens, and you as a patient are not feeling well and are not at your best, and now we have to make all these tough choices. So I think looking at some of the major outliers that come from this genetic information is imperative, and then just always reminding that it's still there and still being open to looking into it as things go on. I think as one of the great things about sequencing is I think they're adding new information all the time about other medications, other diseases, other aspects of health. And so I think from a patient point of view, this is an evolving process and they're holding on to your data the whole time. So if you as a patient have another question, you can always go back in and sort of pull out more information. And this will be something that I hope, with concierge medicine, that continues on, month by month, year by year, as you're working with your physician.
And it seems like, Dr. Colby, that this is kind of like a good baseline, like against which everything else that the patient comes in and out for is compared to. Would you say that that's kind of an accurate oversimplification?
I'd say it's more foundational. So foundational in terms of a health asset that people have, but most people just cannot access. So there's very limited physicians that are out there that are so forward thinking in terms of understanding, getting the entire genome and integrating that into the care is so important because it really is a missing piece for so many people in the world. It is foundational. Everything is built upon it. It's not the end all. It's not where you just need a genetic test and that's all that you need, but it is a very important piece of the puzzle that has been missing for so long. And now we can truly start to unlock it. As Dr. Egan said, also, because we're right at the beginning of the conveyance of this information to people, and there's so much information, overwhelming is definitely a word that we hear and something that we work and strive for almost on a weekly basis in terms of improving how we are conveying that information, on clearing up points of confusion, of coming out with different ways for a person to interact with and benefit from their genetic data. And a lot of that has to do with feedback from Dr. Egan and her team in terms of this is working and this is not. And that's what we're very receptive to. It's not where we just have this service and it is how it is. And you have to put up with it, as opposed to this is a service that we are constantly evolving, and we are very focused on providing as good an experience as possible for both the patient and the physician.
I've always looked at, the work that sequencing has done, as well as the work that concierge medicine as more broadly can do for a patient as, the benchmark against which other practices should be measured against. And so it does take a very forward-thinking physician and care team with a good culture to continue to move the needle. And it is not popular sometimes, and it is overwhelming many times. And so narrowing in on true women's health and sequencing, Dr. Egan, why is this so important for you and for your patients, for women in midlife especially?
Women in midlife really start seeing an acceleration of the class of just chronic diseases. We see a lot of an increase in cardiovascular disease, increase of metabolic disease like obesity, type 2 diabetes. Their lifestyles are changing. This tends to be the most stressful time in a woman's life. Their hormones kind of go all over the place, causing them not to sleep, have mood changes, have fatigue. And so we are starting more so than ever before, making a lot of medical decisions. We're making decisions about diagnostic testing. We're making decisions about screening testing. We're making decisions about possibly starting new medications. And to just come up with that information from population data, it just isn't the best choice. And so if we have a tool that can provide more of a clear path for that woman at that time, as we're kind of rapid fire trying to get all these ducks in a row for her as fast as possible, it just makes sense to add in this genetic information.
And Dr. Colby, you've seen a lot of tests and results, and including my own over the years. What stands out for you related to women in midlife, especially?
How much can be learned throughout a person's life, especially when we're looking at women in midlife that are going through perimenopause and menopause, postmenopause. There's a very changing and variable risk profile of different conditions, and this helps to go and identify what are some like a path that a person may be on due to their genes that may not be evident from, as Dr. Egan said, just looking at general population risk and saying, well, you're in this population, so this is your risk. We can move away from that paradigm into much more personalized care by saying, this is your genes and this is what I see so therefore we're going to go and formulate a plan around you, as opposed to formulating it around some population stratification. This is what I'm told that I should be screening for in someone from this population. So it's really changing the paradigm and the realization of true personalized medicine when we start to look at a person's genes, when we start to tailor our recommendations, our screening, our treatments to what is within that person's DNA.
Dr. Egan, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think the other sort of really important thing to think about is that, women in this, midlife, this is sort of, aside from having babies, this is sort of their first introduction to heavy medicine, right? For a lot of the times they've been healthy, or maybe they've even ignored going to the doctor. And some of them can be quite skeptical about the recommendations I have. I'm like, hey, let's, get at this test or start this drug. And, they sometimes side eye me and are like, why would I do that? Because I'm outside of all these other population data. And if I have more information for them, they just sometimes feel much more confident, starting a medication, taking a test, particularly the pharmacogenomics. If they know that they're low risk for having side effects, that really lowers the barrier to starting medications. And, they feel so cared for when we have that information and we're taking that into account when we're making decisions.
So zooming out, this question is really for both of you, and maybe it's more of, this is the part where I really don't have a question. I have more of commentary. So I'll let you guys kind of extract the question from this. And it seems as though there's some, even at medical conferences, there is, interest in being forward thinking and being a bit of more personalized. But what frustrates, you, Dr. Colby, and you, Dr. Egan, I'll start with Dr. Colby. What frustrates you about not being able to move the needle fast enough in this space and what you do each day?
It's frustrating because I see that it has the potential or is hurting people, that the traditional medical establishment is so ingrained in a system that is broken, and the third-party payer model that is working doctors so hard that they're not able to, most of them are just not able to really focus on the latest technologies, on what is truly best for the patient. They're just trying to keep their head above water and get through 60 patients a day. And anything that slows them down, even if it's a genetic test or talking about the possibility of a genetic test, is just pushed aside because they have so many more patients that they have to get through. So it's that system alone is not working. I think everyone is in agreement with that. And then it's also very much just so focused on being reactive that you don't see your doctor when you're healthy. You see them when something is wrong. And then there's some process that has already taken hold, whereas it's a lot easier to go and prevent and to go and to deal with issues in its earliest stage than when many times symptoms have already started to manifest. So I see the slow adoption of genetic information and the integration into clinical care. Unfortunately, it hurts a lot of people because of that. But the good news is it is now accelerating much than it has in the past. We all thought after the Human Genome Project or around 2001, 2003, that the next year, all of a sudden there would be genetic medicine and everything would be based on DNA. That did not happen, but we're starting to see that more and more, that it's integrating a lot more into clinical management. People are becoming accepting of it. People are now focusing on longevity and the awareness of longevity and longevity medicine, and how concierge physicians can go and deliver a way for a person to go and protect their longevity is becoming more and more part of a person's thought process. And people are just now a lot more aware that this exists. And fortunately, that there are doctors that are very forward thinking that are now accepting of this technology. And it's a lot more powerful when this technology, when the whole genome sequencing is combined with physicians, that are comfortable and knowledgeable, educated in it, that are able to go and be by the patient's side and help to guide the patient with how that information can be utilized.
That's wonderful. Thank you for clarifying that. Dr. Egan, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I always make a joke with my patients, like as your primary care doctor, worst case scenario is you would say, out of nowhere, I had a heart attack, right? And I get frustrated when my colleagues are settled just with the baseline of what we have, because the baseline isn't great, and I echo Dr. Colby saying the system is broken. It is. These physicians are truly pressured on time and limited in their ability to, think a bit outside the box. And all they have is the baseline guidelines that are there. But if we have an opportunity to make this a little bit more personalized, then we may save lives. We may find that one sort of person that needs that extra test, that needs that extra medication, that maybe shouldn't have that medication, and I think if you think about it from the perspective of you're treating that patient in the room today, it only makes sense to have genetic information.
Yeah, I'm so grateful and encouraged as a patient, but as a parent, because I'm always thinking about how are we leaving healthcare a little bit better, because it's a big animal that none of us are really equipped to change, and nor are we given the opportunity to change things or the systems broadly. But, it's more about changing. I want you to change one person's life, right? Like that. If you've done that today, that's the goal. Like you didn't change the world of healthcare, but you changed someone's world, and you changed it with this information and with these conversations that are much more personalized. So our final couple of questions for Dr. Egan and Dr. Colby. Dr. Colby will zoom out, and the same question will be for you, Dr. Egan, as well. Tell us a little bit about, and we may have covered this earlier, but I want you to maybe go zoom out. Why the partnership between the two, and how does it work? And how can other doctors get connected? So I'll let Dr. Colby start, and then whatever holes he didn't fill in from a practice perspective, you can fill in the blanks there as well, Dr. Egan. So Dr. Colby, go ahead.
We've used the word forward thinking and the ability to see how new technology can impact and benefit from patients a lot throughout this discussion. And that is what True Women's Health exemplifies, that they are truly forward thinking about the different health areas that they go and focus on, looking at sleep, looking at nutrition, looking at stress and stress management, a lot of areas that are overlooked but have tremendous impact upon a person's wellness, upon their longevity, and genetics plays a role in all of those. So it has been an honor for our team to go and work with True Women's Health to design a way for genetic information to be utilized by their service and to integrate into their service and to start to see how physicians are benefiting from and using this information with their patients and the ability to go and improve our product based on that feedback. So that has been great to see. And as a physician myself, that is really the true integration of genetics into healthcare is a realization of this personalized medicine, this personalized approach that we now see from True Women's Health. So it has been great working with them, and this is really just the beginning.
All right, Ian, anything you would like to add to that from your perspective?
Yeah, so when we reached out to sequencing, we worked together to come up with, the information we thought would be the most valuable to fit into our wellness plan, with the knowledge that if a patient wanted to collect more information, they were always open to do that. And we were always there to be on their team and interpret those results with them as well. But with our ability to come up with what we call like our true package, we know that that's the baseline information that we would like all of our patients to have to be able to answer some of what we believe are the most important questions. And as our patients have moved through our wellness plans, we've gone through piece by piece some of that information, and we hope to continue to sort of see how this plays out over the year. Our wellness plan we do not do in one session. We'd sort of spread out over the year, because thinking about every aspect of your heart, your brain, your bones, your liver, as you're going through can be a lot for one visit. So as we sort of review that wellness plan over the year, we'll continue to pull in that information that they got from that one-time package.
And I think about my experience with my data and my experiences over the years with my doctors is I'm not necessarily reminding them, but I am putting one chunk of like one puzzle piece and saying, okay, I'm in here for today for this, but I want to also talk about this. So don't forget it, and it's not me training my doctor, but it's kind of saying, just a reminder, like this is important to me. I want to be preventive. And even in a concierge model, sometimes that can be difficult as well. They're not a perfect model by any means, but it is a better model in many ways. So I do find that, as a patient, being proactive with my data and going back into the exam room and saying, hey, I know it's not on the agenda today, but can we talk a little bit about this particular subject? And I don't want to talk about it all. He's like, oh, yeah, that test again, It's like, yeah, I know, it's awesome. And he's like, yeah, it's a lot and it's big and it's pretty amazing. Any thoughts on working with patients? Are they coming in to you to be more accountable, or are you leading that discussion? And Dr. Colby, I'll let you add your thoughts too.
Yeah, because that is our model of our concierge practice, is to really take a step back and do a lot of preventative health. We tend to lead those conversations. But of course, if a patient had a specific question about, their sequencing, we would step back and answer that. And I think a lot of it gets into what question is really at the heart of what they want out of that information. Is it that they're looking to make sure that they're not missing a screening test? Is it that they have a new symptom and they want us to use that to pick a diagnostic test? And so I think of getting at the heart of that patient's fear and concern is, really imperative. And like I said, I think keep going back to that information and always knowing it's part of it. I mean, we hope, right, that the future is, we use these genetics and we look at it just like we do labs. Like if a patient comes in and tells me that they're fatigued, like I'm going to immediately, right, go into the labs and make sure they're not anemic and check out all these different things. So we hope that that becomes an integrative piece within practice and within the clinical process that we do in the office.
And Dr. Colby, I want you to add to that as well, but also, how do you see whole genome sequencing advancing more personalized medicine and concierge medicine in the future? Because so a little bit looking back, but also looking forward for you.
One of the words that you used was data, and that you go to your physician and you speak with them about the data that you have. And that, I think, is a very important concept. That's something that we make clear that everyone, all of our customers, they own their data, which is very different than what's been done in the personal genomics industry in the past. I think people feel like their data has been pulled from them and then monetized in some way. And that is what is really special about the patient-physician relationship is the patient knows that physician is there and doesn't have other, they're not monetizing that interaction or have any other loyalty as opposed to just doing what is best for that patient. And we have a similar perspective, me being trained as a doctor. That's really what we believe at sequencing, that the person owns their data. And starting from that perspective, then everything that we do is focus on how we can provide the best experience. So where whole genome sequencing is going in the future is that the experience of benefiting from that information in terms of the person, if it's your genome, of you obtaining more and more value in an easier and easier way, is going to start to increase substantially. So instead of the question of why should I have my genome sequenced, what can I do with it? It's going to shift to why wouldn't I have my genome sequenced? Because there's all these ways to benefit from it. My doctor now is open to accepting it and is utilizing this information. And also there's all these other things that I can now learn from this that is provided to me in a safe way, in a safe and trusted format.
I was actually really surprised when we had open house kind of launching this and talking with our patients about it, how many questions were about data, about who owned it, where it was going, who was going to look at it. There were questions, honestly, I was kind of embarrassed I didn't think of when we were talking about it, but patients were very serious about that. And, I think they felt very reassured that their data was theirs, that they owned, and it wasn't going to be used, one, by other people, and two, being sold for other reasons and to get profit from. And that was a huge concern of my patients that, felt confident after we had a good discussion with our representatives from sequencing.
And Dr. Colby, over the years, you've kind of been a part of the business side of things, but also the clinical side of things and the data side of things. How hard has that common thread of this is your data and we're keen to keep it private? How hard has that been with all of the, interest, but also maybe third parties, because people want the data, right? So how hard has that been to keep that common thread throughout the entire sequencing storyline?
It's been challenging because and just as you mentioned, you get pulled from people, advisors to the company that saying, look at all these other business models out there. They're all benefiting from pharmaceutical partnerships and from therapeutic investigations. And maybe you can license therapeutics to stand firm in terms of we don't use our customers' data for researching. We're not there to go and formulate therapeutics ourselves to benefit from that. We don't work with pharmaceutical companies specifically to avoid any type of perspective that we may be utilizing our customers' data in some nefarious way. Once you go and you have that perspective that the consumer is your customer, and just like that a patient is that primary person that you're there to go and protect, that your loyalty is to them, then it starts to become a lot easier. That okay, those are other companies' business models, but this is sequencing. We do things differently, and protecting that person's data is core to everything that we do. And we've seen, I think, with the downfall of 23andMe, they were not focused on that. The business model did not work. And when they tried to go and pivot to saying, oh, all of our customers that we actually do care about you, it was too late at that point. And I think people did not really trust them anymore. They had lost that trust. For us, we understand how special that is, and how much a part of our brand that trust is, and something that we always work to go and maintain, understanding that the trust has very much been shaken by people, that they just understand from how media has portrayed the personal genomics industry, what happened with 23andMe, all the different hacks of people's data, that law enforcement can access people's data in some genetic testing companies. That is definitely a very large concern, as Dr. Egan said, that people voice that all the time, but that has also just further helped our differentiation, that we've held firm to that. We have not heard. We've only leaned in and made sure that it was as clear as possible in terms of calling it privacy forever. That's our commitment to our customers, and something that we have seen over the years is very defining, both to us as our internal culture and also to our customers.
Well, and I want to thank you for that, because I know that's been a difficult struggle and challenge and conversations over the years. Because as a patient, as a customer, we hear those platitudes, which is, what they are in the marketplace, because we've been sold those, right? And so, we kind of like, okay, let's hope it works out that way. And so I appreciate that about you guys. And couple of final things as we come in for a landing here. Dr. Egan, if you're, sitting in a room of physicians and, they're really curious about sequencing, they're really curious about what you're doing as well, what would be your, run towards this? Because so many physicians out there are very interested in this. And usually my guesstimations are pretty accurate. I would say out of 4 out of every 10 doctors are going to be like, I want to run towards this type of thing. Whereas the others are going to be like, I need to do a little bit more research. So I need to know a little bit more, and that's fine. But, they're not, you don't want them to continue to criticize or stand at the back of the room with their arms crossed. That's not the goal here. The goal is to make healthcare just a little bit better than how it found us and how it found you. So how would you encourage them?
I think one interesting step would honestly be to sequence their own genome, right? And give a look, and to be like, hey, what did I learn from this about my own health, and how would I apply that? If that did not feel like a great option, you can usually find 2 or 3 patients that are really excited about, new advancements. And with the risk being so low with a cheek squab, we're really not talking about a great risk, that it's worth just kind of taking a couple of baby steps and really just spending some time to learn about how helpful this could be. And I think once doctors get familiar with interpreting this and talking to their patients about it, I think they'll find it so helpful.
And Dr. Colby, we'll ask this of both of you. How would I find more information, learn more about this? We'll put the links in the show notes as well, the socials, the more description as well about what we've talked about. But Dr. Colby, anything you want to add to that when you onboard new doctors, or you're talking to them about it for the first time?
So for patients, it would be contacting True Women's Health. They could also go to sequencing.com to learn more information. For healthcare professionals, we always love to engage with healthcare professionals. That would be contacting our support team, and then they route that person to the right person, so that we can learn about how that physician is thinking about utilizing genetic information. As Dr. Egan said, the first step is just having that physician have their genome sequenced so that they could experience the whole service. And that's one of the most important things. But also allowing us to go and discuss what the needs are and seeing if there's a way to go and tailor a solution to that specific physician's practice.
Great. Dr. Egan, this will be your final question. Dr. Colby, you'll have the same question. And we ask this of all of our guests. This is a softball question, but it really, I think, gets to the heart, no pun intended, but you know what I'm saying. I'm a dad, so I have my teenage daughter rolls her eyes all the time. So, Dr. Egan, what do you want to be known for?
Wow, that's a really, I thought this was a softball question. I think I'm a primary care doctor at heart, and I want to be known for a great primary care doctor who is forward thinking and thinks about the patient that is in the room and not just applying, the standard practices that we would see for everybody.
Great. And Dr. Colby, I've asked you this question, I think, over the years, but I'll ask it again. What do you want to be known for?
That I helped integrate genetic information into people's lives, and they were able to benefit from that. There was value that they were able to obtain from my work, which is truly my passion.
Well, as a dad, as a parent, as a spouse, as a sandwich generation caregiver, I am so excited about this partnership, about more of these types of partnerships with sequencing and concierge medicine and more concierge medicine practices. We'll put the links to True Women's Health as well as sequencing.com in the show notes below. So if you'd like to learn more about True Women's Health as well as sequencing and how to get involved, how to get onboarded, what it's going to look like for your practice, we want to help you connect with the right folks. And this is something that I'm encouraged about. Like, there are not many podcasts there. Well, I'd say there are a lot of podcasts I'm encouraged about, but this one is really exciting because I think it shows where we're heading in the future. And the time is now to start implementing this kind of thing into your practice. And these are not sponsored podcasts. Like, this is information and education that we feel as though concierge medicine is always leading the way in many great ways. And so the partnership here and the moving with sequencing.com and this concierge medicine practice of True Women's Health, thank you guys for being forward thinkers, because I sometimes I feel like I have the happiest job or the greatest job in healthcare because I get to work with 98% of the doctors I talk to are happy doctors. And so thank you guys for being the forward thinking, physicians that you're leaving healthcare a little bit better than how it found you. As we always say around here, it's no longer about being the best doctor in the world anymore.
Yeah.
It's about being the best doctor for the world and for your patients and for your local community. So thank you guys, thank you, Dr. Egan, and thank you, Dr. Colby, for being forward thinking and moving the needle a little bit better, because this gives me encouragement that my kids will be well taken care of and well informed with their data.
Yeah, it's exciting.
All right. Well, that's all. I will let you guys go. And that's it. Thank you guys for being our guest today on the Docpreneur Leadership Podcast, where we explore the intersection of medicine and innovation and precision medicine and leadership and even business, and helping doctors and clinicians build practices that thrive, not just survive. So thank you guys for being our guest today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.